Oh, Diddy.
All right. Well, let's get underway. A quick recap. We did scene 1 and scene 2 last week. Scene 1, though it is taken from the 3rd book of the original Paradise Lost epic, is an excellent introduction. What Professor Richmond has done is take out parts from the original Paradise Lost that make speeches, which are speeches and are dramatic. And he's arranged them into a play. And the epic has a wonderful prologue and opening, and we ended things last week with my reading that. This is from the 3rd book, the opening scene 1, and he has Milton as a character. And Milton speaks of the heavenly light, which is now denied him. He had gone blind. And when he did Paradise Lost, he had already published many, many things, including a great deal of poetry, but by then he was completely blind. So he dictated Paradise Lost to his daughter and to a couple of other scribes who were writing things out for him. And we said last week, I gave a few biographical details about Milton. Milton was a propagandist for the English Republic of 1649 to 1659. Cromwell fell out of favor with him, however, and he began to speak out against the protectorate and had to go into exile within Britain. So he was a rebellious soul, and that comes out very clear in the character of Satan. He understands rebellion. He also understood marriage very well and was maybe a deeper and better thinker about that office and institution than anybody else, certainly in the 17th century. And when we get to Adam and Eve, we will see how that plays out in the drama and in the dialogues. In scene 2, which we finished last week, scene 2 is the war in heaven and its predicate. What prompts the war in heaven? Which war in heaven? This gets us to the biblical material that John Milton is working on. Here is the epistle for the Mass of St. Michael and Archangel. It's in our prayer book on page 252, and it's Revelation 12:7. There was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent, called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and the angels were cast out with him. And there is also this, which Jesus makes a reference to in the gospel, saying that he saw Satan fall. And Isaiah 14:12, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. Now, interestingly, that sounds like it's about the fall of the angels from heaven, right?
Correct.
That is how it was taken by the medieval church. The actual text, in Isaiah, it is a metaphor about the king of Babylon. And saying that the king of Babylon has exalted himself above God and above God's throne. Of course, in doing that, he is like the devil, isn't he? So it works both ways, by text and by tradition. That's pretty much it biblically. Of course, by New Testament times, there was a great deal of what's called Jewish pseudepigrapha, Jewish writings that were not quite canonical and ultimately did not make the cut. One of these, and one of the most popular, one of the longest, was called the Book of Enoch, which was lost to us for many, many centuries and was finally discovered in an edition in Ethiopic. It survived in Ethiopia, even though in most places it had disappeared. And Enoch is from the first few chapters of Genesis, and he's one of the descendants of Adam who is said to have walked with God such that he did not die and was taken up into heaven. And so there grew up a literature of Enoch basically taking the writer on a tour of the heavenly realms. And the book of Revelation kind of follows this pattern where John is being taken up into the heavenly realms and being shown everything there, but also shown things that are going to happen in the future. Chapter 12, which is where I read to you from Revelation, the St. Michael epistle about there was war in heaven, seems to be looking backward, though, not forward in Revelation. It's kind of, John is being given a vision of what happened in heaven a long time ago. And of course, that is Milton's subject matter. So he introduces the book as a character, introduces the play as a character in scene 1, making reference to his own blindness and hoping that though he has been denied perception of the natural light, the Spirit, and this is one of the few references to the Spirit, capitalized, presumably the Holy Spirit in Milton, that he will give him a heavenly vision, an ability to see spiritual things that are not of the material. In other words, give him the power to tell this story and write this epic. Scene 2 sets up the war in heaven, and we read that as a group last week. And if you'll recall, what happened is that there is God as a character and there is the Son as a character. And the drama opens with God introducing the Son to the hosts of heaven who are as yet unfallen, and demanding that they give him the same, give the Son the same respect and reverence that they would give for him. And immediately Satan starts to feel slighted and gathers with Beelzebub. Now that is a biblical name. Satan and Beelzebub are both named in the New Testament. Beelzebub is that figure that the Pharisees accused Jesus of being influenced by. So he was already a figure of the Judaism of late antiquity in the Holy Land had made this Baal, that's where Beelzebub is a Baal Zabub, and he's one of the Baals of Canaanite religion, and he's become, by Jesus's day, a demonic figure, a prince of devils. So Milton uses that character, and also a character, Abdiel, who he makes up. That's not anywhere else in religious literature. He makes up Abdiel. Abdiel is the one who is being recruited by Satan and Beelzebub, but is questioning the whole enterprise and what they are doing. And we had a wonderful comment last week that the way it is set up, what Satan is upset about is that it seems like somebody else has been promoted ahead of him. And we sort of developed last week a wonderful allegory of office politics And that does sort of apply, at least in the way Milton has put this together. And in fact, what Satan decides they're going to do is they're going to ask the Son to come join them, but that's where they're going to attack. And when this play version was produced, there was a big sort of ballet of the war in heaven that was done. And then they all fall, and it is the Son who laments their disappearance. And this, I'm going to start, and Avi has mentioned the Lord of the Flies. There is definitely themes like that going on among the devils, for sure. And we're going to see that in scene 3 as we get to it. Let me, okay. I'm going to scroll down to the end of scene 2, and we will see the Son laments the fall. You see that stage instruction at the top of page 20 there is the war in heaven. Rebel angels mime battle with loyal ones. Defeated, Satan, Beelzebub, Moloch, Belial, Mammon, Astarte, sin and death lie writhing and shed white robes to reveal garish costumes. So in heaven, when they were all together as a court, the heavenly court, they were all wearing white robes in the staging of this. And when they fell, the fallen ones shed their white robes and were shown to be wearing all different colors. And here is the Son's comment. The dismal situation, waste and wild, a dungeon horrible on all sides round as one great furnace flames. Yet from those flames no light, but rather darkness visible, serves only to discover sights of woe, regions of sorrow, doleful shades where peace and rest can never dwell. Hope never comes, that comes to all, but torture without end still urges, and a fiery deluge fed with ever-burning sulfur unconsumed. And then the stage direction that Professor Richmond has added, God and Son retire to their thrones upstage right with Abdiel, Raphael, and the other loyal angels and continue to observe. One of the things that they did when they staged this was no matter what was going on, God and the Son on their thrones were watching it and seeing it. So the devil figures think that they're being sneaky and they're going to get away with something. But of course, God knows exactly what they're going to do. And before the fall, I'm going to go back a couple of pages. And this is Satan's most extraordinary speech in the first scene. He is responding to Abdiel, the angelic being who is arguing against the plan. And Abdiel is reminding them that they're created by God. And this is psychologically brilliant because this is what's happened to our whole society. What the devil is about to say here, what Satan says, that we were formed then, sayest thou, and the work of secondary hands, by task transferred from father to son? Strange point and new doctrine which we would know whence learned. Who saw when this creation was? Rememberest thou thy making while the maker gave thee being? We know no time when we were not as now. None before us self-begot, self-raised. Our puissance is our own right hand shall teach us highest deeds, by proof to try who is our equal. Then thou shalt behold whether by supplication we intend address and to begirt the almighty throne, beseeching and besieging. This report, these tidings, carry to the anointed king and fly ere evil intercept thy flight. I love that. Who saw when this creation was? Okay. Yeah. Remember, Satan is the prince of lies. He knows perfectly well that he's a created being, but he is trying to convince the other devils. We know no time when we were not as now. No, none before us. Very, very subtle. And of the essence of evil, denying one's creatureliness, the fact that one is created of God and therefore bound to God. All right, so now, I'm sorry about scrolling in front of you. In scene 3, they are in hell. The fallen angels lie prostrate, but Satan rises alone, center stage. And Matt, why don't we have you be the devil to start with? I don't see Michael.
You can hear me okay?
I don't see Michael Watterson here. I can hear you fine. Let's get all these parts assigned. So first, Matt will be Satan. And who wants to be Moloch? Hang on, I can't see all of you. Bud, you can be Moloch.
Okay.
We also have Beelzebub, Belial, and Mammon. These are all demons. This scene is only the fallen angels. It's their first conference after the fall. So Bud is going to be Moloch. Patsy, will you be Mammon?
Sure.
Okay. Louise, you want to be Belial? And Greg, would you be Beelzebub? Oh, he's gone.
Oh.
Father, oh, there he is. Greg, will you read Beelzebub in scene 3? Okay. Greg, Matt, Bud, Louise, and Patsy. All right. Matt, you want to start?
Sure. All right. And I think I'm starting with a typo. I'm not sure. In the first line, if thou beest best thee.
This is, there is some archaic spelling here. It's if thou beest he.
Oh, okay, okay. If thou beest he, but oh, how fallen, how changed from him who in the happy realms of light, clothed with transcendent brightness, didst outshine myriads thou bright. If he whom mutual league, united thoughts and counsels, equal hope and hazard in the glorious enterprise, joined with me once, now misery hath joined in equal ruin. Into that pit thou seest, from what highest fallen, so much the stronger proved he with his thunder. Until then, who knew the force of those dire arms? Yet not for those, nor what the potent victor in his rage can else inflict, do I repent or change. Though changed in outward luster, that fixed mind and high disdain from sense of injured merit, that with the mightiest raised me to contend, and to the fierce contention brought along innumerable force of spirits, armed and shook his throne. What though the field be lost? All is not lost. The unconquerable will, the study of revenge, immortal hate, and courage never to submit or yield. And what is else not to be overcome? That glory never shall his wrath or might extort from me. To bow and sue for grace with supplicant knee, and deify his power, who from the terror of his arms so late doubted his empire, that were low indeed, since through experience of his great event, in arms not worse, in foresight much advanced, we may with more successful hope resolve to wage by force or guile eternal war.
Greg, you're muted.
All right. O Prince, O Chief of many throned powers,
that led the embattled seraphim to war under thy conduct and in dreadful deeds fearless. Endangered heaven's perpetual king, too well I see the rue and dire event, that with sad overthrow and foul defeat hath lost us heaven, and all this mighty host in horrible destruction laid thus low, as far as gods and heavenly essences can perish. For the mind and spirit remain invincible, and vigor soon returns. But what if he our conqueror, whom I now of force believe almighty, since no less than such could have overpowered such force as ours, have left us this spirit and strength entire, strongly to suffer and support our pains, that we may so suffice his vengeful ire, or do him mightier service as his thralls.
Fallen cherub, to be weak is miserable, doing or suffering. But of this be sure, to do aught good never will be our task, but ever to do ill our sole delight, as being the contrary to his high will, whom we resist. If then his providence out of our evil seek to bring forth good, our labor must be pervert that end, and out of good still to find means of evil, which oft times may succeed, so as perhaps shall grieve him. If I fail not and disdain, seest thou yon dreary plain, forlorn and wild, the seat of desolation, void of light? Is this the region, this soil, the clime, that we must change for heaven, this mournful gloom, for that celestial light? Be it so, since he who now is sovereign can dispose and bid what shall be right, farthest from him is best, whom reason hath equaled, force hath made supreme, above his equals. Farewell, happy fields, where joy forever dwells. Hail, horrors, hail, infernal world, and thou, profoundest hell, receive thy new possessor, one who brings a mind not to be changed by place or time. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. What matter where, if I be still the same? Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. For wherefore let we then our faithful friends, the associates and co-partners of our loss, lie thus astonished on the oblivious pool, and call that not to share with us their part in this unhappy mansion, or once more with rallied arms to try what may be yet regained in heaven, or what more lost in hell.
Greg?
Oh, sorry. Taking notes. Leader of those armies bright, if once they hear that voice, their liveliest pledge of hope in fears and dangers, heard so oft in worst extremes, and on the perilous edge of battle when it raged, in all assaults their surest signal, they will soon resume new courage and revive. Though now they lie groveling and prostrate on your lake of fire, no wonder, fallen such a pernicious height.
Matt, before you pick it up, first question to ask, and this is a good break point because this is dialogue has just been between the two of them. It's like Satan is the first one to get up. Okay? At the beginning, they're all, they've been defeated in battle. They've fallen from heaven to earth, and they're just sort of lying there. Then Satan gets up, and then Beelzebub gets up, and they have this dialogue. Are they at all repentant? No.
It sounds like they're defiant.
Quite the contrary.
Oh,
Yeah, no, they have no remorse at all.
They're sorry they got defeated, but they're not sorry that they rebelled.
Right, right. An important distinction to make.
And it doesn't sound like or he wants to be defeated. It sounds like he's making plans for continued rebellion.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And
To take joy
here
in it.
is, I wonder if I can highlight this. No, I can't highlight this. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven is one of the most famous lines of Paradise Lost. In fact, every now and then someone will say it's in the Bible, but it's not. The Bible doesn't have lengthy dialogues between angelic beings anywhere. But it sure is a wonderful line, at least in the mouth of the prince of this rebellion. And he also says, and here is Milton understanding the power of subjectivism. The mind is its own place and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven.
Mhm.
Can the mind make a heaven of hell?
No,
Maybe.
but
Maybe.
it can make a hell of heaven.
Exactly. Yeah. You might be able to fool your, in fact, if you're in hell, you may not know it at first. That's the wonderful thing in C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce. They don't know they're in hell. In fact, they think that they think they're in the good place.
Yeah, it's like
They
boiling a
must be in
frog.
the good place because they are them.
It's like boiling a frog. It takes a while to know
Right. Right.
just exactly what your situation is. To me, the most chilling thing that Satan says is this, since through experience of an event in arms not worse, in foresight much advanced, we may with more successful hope resolve to
I'm sorry,
win.
Patsy, where is that? What's the
This
page?
is the end of Satan's first speech in scene 3.
There we go. There we go. In arms not worse, in foresight much advanced, we may with more successful hope resolve to wage by force or guile eternal war.
By
Yeah.
force or guile. This
Force or
is really happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
It happens all the time. You know, if we say, oh, well, we say, oh, well, it's not force, but we don't recognize the guile.
The guile.
Or
Right.
the guile doesn't look like force. We don't realize how close it is. So,
Yeah. In fact, how do angels and devils mostly influence our lives?
flattery,
Yeah. By temptation.
nation.
Devils tempt and angels call us to our better nature. In fact, you remember those Bugs Bunny cartoons where there's
Filters.
a devil of Daffy over here and an angel of Daffy over here, or of Bugs? That's actually pretty good theology. Because basically what angelic beings are doing now is simply trying to influence humans. That's their main activity. And for the devils, that's by guile, right? And by flattery. These last 3 lines that you've pointed out here, Patsy, are kind of hell's mission statement. To take it back to that allegory of the office and office politics that we were working with last week, there's their mission statement. Waged by force or guile, eternal war. All right, so
Brother Mike, on
yes.
on this famous line about serving in heaven versus ruling in hell, can we say a little more about just the class issues of the time when Milton was writing? That in our time, the difference between being a ruler and being a servant is not nearly as far apart as it was in Milton's time. In Milton's time, if you were part of the ruling class versus not part of the ruling class, it was a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, it often meant the difference between eating and not eating, or eating every day versus eating every other day. Yeah, the differences and the disparities of wealth were, on the whole, much, much greater. And Milton himself had experienced what we would now call a fall from grace, because he had been on the ins with the ruling party. He'd been a member of it and he'd fallen out. Now he had patrons, particularly his father-in-law, who assisted him from becoming and kept him from becoming completely destitute. But then at the same time, he was also going blind. And if you were a blind person in this society or disabled in any kind of way, you were in bad shape, very seriously. And there wasn't a whole lot you could do. You became completely dependent on the kindness of relations or the kindness of strangers, depending on where you were and what was going on. All right. And of course, Beelzebub is constantly flattering Satan. That's one of his jobs. And I like this last part. Though now they lie groveling and prostrate on yon lake of fire, no wonder fall in such a pernicious height. He's commenting on the distance between heaven and hell and earth, which is infinite, or heaven and hell, which is even farther. Now Satan is going to be addressing all the devils. Matt, you want to pick it up there unless anybody else has something to say? Greg, I think you were talking, but you're muted.
Go for it.
I'm getting a lot of feedback, so I'm trying to mute so you're the only one broadcasting.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just thinking about Beelzebub's last comment there. It's not that we got our ass kicked, it's that we fell from so far.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, that is that's what we now call spin. Right? All right, Matt, you want to pick it up? Princes,
potentates, warriors, the flower of heaven, once yours, now lost. If such astonishment as this can seize eternal spirits, or have ye chaos, have you chosen this place, after the toil of battle to repose, or in this abject posture have ye sworn to adore the conqueror? Who now beholds cherub and seraph rolling in the flood? Awake, arise, or be forever fallen. Powers and dominions, deities of heaven, I give not heaven for lost. From this descent, celestial virtues rising will appear more glorious and more dread than from no fall, and trust themselves to fear no second fate. Me, though just right, and the fixed laws of heaven, did first create your leader. Next, free choice, established in a safe, unenvied throne, yielded with full consent. The happier state in heaven, which follows dignity, might draw envy from each inferior. But who here will envy whom the highest place exposes? Foremost to stand against the thunderer's aim, your bulwark, and condemns to the greatest share of present pain, that with an ambitious mind will covet more. With this advantage then to union and firm faith and firm accord, more than can be in heaven, we now return to claim our just inheritance of old, surer to prosper than any prosperity could have assured us. And by what best way, whether of open war or covert guile, we now debate. Who can advise may speak.
Hello? I can't hear anybody.
It's your turn, bud.
Okay. My sentence is for open war. Of wiles contrive who need, or when they need, not now. For while they sit contriving, shall the rest there you go, millions that stand in arms and long wait. The signal to ascend, sit lingering here. The prison of his tyranny who reigns by our delay? No, let us rather choose. Armed with hell, flames, and fury all at once, or heaven's high towers to force resistless way. The event is feared. Should we again provoke, or stronger, some worse way his wrath may find, to our destruction, if there be in hell, fear to be worse destroyed, what can be worse than to dwell here, driven out from bliss, condemned in this abhorred deep to utter woe? What fear we then? What doubt we to incense? His utmost ire, which to the highest enraged will either quite consume us and reduce to nothing this essential happier far than miserable to have eternal being, or if our substance be indeed divine and cannot cease to be, we are at worst on this side nothing, and by proof we feel our powers sufficient to disturb his heaven, which if not victory is yet revenge.
And Louise?
Yeah, trying to,
Hold on.
I should be much. This keeps moving.
Sorry about that. It should be
I-
still now.
I should be much for open war, O peers, as not behind in hate, if what was urged did not dissuade me most, and seemed to cast ominous conjecture on the whole success. When he who most excels in fact of arms, in what he counsels, and in what excels, mistrustful, grounds his courage on despair and utter dissolution, as the scope of all his sin, of all his aim, after some dire revenge. First, what revenge? The towers of heaven are scorning surprise. Or could we break our way by force, and at our heels all hell should rise with blackest insurrection to confound heaven's purest light, yet our great enemy, all incorruptible, would on his throne sit unpolluted, and the ethereal mold victorious. Thus repulsed, our final hope is flat despair. Is that what is next?
Yes.
Is flat despair. We must exasperate the all-might victor to spend all his rage, and that must end us. That must be our cure, to be no more. Sad cure, for who would lose, though full of pain, this intellectual being? What can we suffer worse? Is this then worst, thus sitting, thus consulting, thus in arms? Shall we then live thus vile, the race of heaven thus trampled, thus expelled, to suffer here chains and these torments? Better these two than were something or other. By my advice, since fate inevitable subdues us an omnipotent decree, I laugh when those who at the spear are bold and venturous, if that fail them, shrink and fear, what yet they know must follow, to endure exile or ignominy of bonds or pain, the sentence of their conqueror. This is now our doom, which if we can sustain and bear, our supreme foe in time may much remit his anger, and perhaps thus far removed, not mind us, not offending, satisfied this horror will grow mild, this darkness light, if we procure not to ourselves more woe.
Amen.
E- Either
I-
to,
Either
it?
to dethrone,
Yeah, that's Patsy, Bud, not.
oh, sorry, okay.
either to dethrone the King of heaven we war, or if war be best, or to regain our own right lost, him to enthrone we then may hope, when everlasting fate shall yield to fickle chance and chaos judge the strife. The former, vain to hope, argues as vain. The latter, for what place can be for us within heaven's bound, unless heaven's Lord supreme we overpower, suppose he should relent and publish grace to all on promise made of new subjugation. With what eyes could we stand in his presence humble and receive strict laws imposed to celebrate his throne with warbled hymns and to his Godhead sing forced hallelujahs? While he lordly sits in heaven, this our delight, how wearisome, eternity so spent in worship paid to whom we hate. Let us not then pursue by force impossible, by leave obtained unacceptable, though in heaven our state of splendid vassalage, but rather seek hard liberty before the easy yoke of servile pomp. Our greatness will appear then most conspicuous when great things of small, useful of hurtful, useful of hurtful, prosperous of adverse, we can create, and what place soe'er thrive under evil and work ease out of pain through labor and endurance. This deep world wants not her hidden luster, gems and gold, nor want we skill or art from whence to raise magnificence, and what can heaven show more? Our torments also may in length of time become our element, those piercing fires as soft as now severe, our temper changed into their temper, which must needs remove the sensible of pain. All things invite to peaceful counsels and the settled state of what we are and where, dismissing quite all thoughts of war. Ye have what I advise.
Thrones and imperial powers, offspring of heaven, ethereal virtues, are these titles now in changing style be called princes of hell? For so the popular vote inclines here to continue and build up here a growing empire, doubtless, while we dream, in strictest bondage, though thus far removed his captive multitude. For he, be sure, in height and depth, still first and last will reign. What sit we then projecting peace and war? War hath determined us, and foiled with loss inflicted, and what peace can we return? But to our power, hostility and hate, untamed reluctance, and revenge, though slow. Now will occasion want, nor shall we need, with dangerous expedition to invade heaven, whose high walls fear no assault or siege, or ambush from the deep. What if we find some easier enterprise? There is a place, if ancient and prophetic fame in heaven ere not, another world, the happy seat of some new race called man, about this time to be created like to us, though less in power and excellence, but favored more. Thither let us bend all our thoughts to learn what creatures there inhabit, of what mold or substance, how endued, and what their power, and where their weakness, how attempted best by force or subtlety. Though heaven be shut, some advantageous act may be achieved by sudden onset, either with hellfire to waste his whole creation, or possess all as our own, and drive as we were driven, the puny inhabitants. Or if not drive, seduce them to our party, that their God may prove their foe, and with repenting hand abolish his own works. This would surpass common revenge, and interrupt his joy fated so soon. Advise if this be worth attempting, or to sit in darkness here, hatching vain empires.
Matt, before you start, we have here all the different sort of perspectives on defeat that you can have, right? We've got to fight again another day. Or why don't we go over to this other place? This is the first mention that we've heard of the race of man.
Or why
More
don't we
favor
just
the
adapt?
less powerful. What was that, Patsy?
Why don't we just adapt?
Well, yeah, and they've already done that. But the question is, what next? You know, by Satan saying better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven, he's definitely adapting. The question is then what's next?
Yeah. Mammon though is kind of saying at the end, well, you know, maybe after a while it won't be so bad here.
Yeah. Like, you know, we're not going to be able to
It won't
defeat
be
God.
so hot.
We're not going to disthrone him. It's not going to work. Let's try something else.
Yeah.
All right. Matt, this is the last speech, so give it your all.
Okay. Well, have you judged? Well ended long debate. Great things resolved, which from the lowest deep will once more lift us up, in spite of fate. Near our ancient seat, perhaps in view of those bright confines, whence with neighboring arms and opportune excursions, we may chance re-enter heaven, or else in some mild zone, purge off this gloom. The soft, delicious air shall breathe her balm. But first, whom shall we send in search of this new world? Whom shall we find sufficient? Who shall tempt with wandering feet the dark, unbottomed, infinite abyss? And through the palpable obscure find out the happy isle? What strength, what art can then suffice? Or what evasion bear him safe? But I should ill become this throne, O peers, and this imperial sovereignty, adorned with splendor, armed with power, if aught proposed and judged a public moment in the shape of difficulty or danger could deter me from attempting. Wherefore do I assume these royalties and not refuse to reign? Terror of heaven, though fallen, intend at my home, while here shall be our home. What best may ease the present misery and render hell more tolerable, if there be cure or charm, to respite or receive or slack the pain of this ill mansion, intermit no watch against a wakeful foe, while I abroad through all the coast of dark destruction seek deliverance from us all, for us all. This enterprise, none shall partake with me.
Thank you, Matt. So it looks like they're going to have to do some investigating before they decide what their course of action is. That's the end result of this caucus of the fallen. And as you can see from the beginning of scene 4, Satan by himself is going to make a journey. He's going to go into limbo. And Greg, what is limbo?
It's an ancient Caribbean dance.
I knew you were going to say that. No. limbo is another hypothesized realm. The place where ultimately, I think it's unbaptized infants will wind up in limbo, according to St. Augustine.
Correct.
Yeah. So Milton uses this concept, which frankly, as a theological matter, he didn't believe in. He is basically a Presbyterian, or at least that's the party that he was part of. So purgatory, anything but heaven, earth, and hell is not biblical and therefore not something they're interested in. But here it is, limbo. All right. Thank you all for reading. Shall we read through that again? Do we have some other people who want to read?
I have a question.
Father, Ursula, Kathy?
I have a question. It
Yes.
said it said that they voted. What did they vote on? I missed them. They voted to go to earth and to corrupt man.
Well, the only time there was what could be called a vote is before the war in heaven. So back in scene 2, Abdiel was, let me get rid of this for a moment. Abdiel was speaking against the idea of the rebellion, okay? And the people who, the angelic beings who decided to go with Satan and rebel, that's how they voted. I think that's the reference there.
Well, it's at chapter 2 between 370, right after 2.376. It says they vote.
I'm sorry, what?
It's just before Satan's last speech in that
Right.
scene,
In scene 2.
or scene 3, I guess.
No, I think you're talking about scene 3, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's what it says they vote. That's what her question was about, I think.
Give us a
Yes,
line.
exactly.
Okay, it's Roman numeral 2.376 in the margin. And it's just
They
before
vote.
Satan says, "Well, have you judged? Will ended long debate."
Oh, okay, at the top of page 29.
Yeah.
Right.
And so is that just an indication that they're voting, or? Like,
Oh, it says in the, yeah, it says in the stage direction, they vote.
That's right.
So
But
that's
I don't
something that
see
has
what
been added. It's not actually in the text.
But what is the issue that they voted on?
Oh, the approach, right? What approach? Are we going to give in? Are we just going to stick around and stay where we are and make the best of it? Or are we going to battle? Or are we going to
Seduce this new creature called man.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I think it says, but am
Yeah,
I right?
no, I think so.
yeah, I think
I
that's
think so. They have decided they're not going to mount a second assault on the heavenly throne.
Right. They've given up that fight. So they decided to get the weak sister man into trouble.
Exactly.
Okay.
good.
So
choice.
notice that Satan immediately hijacks that, right? If you're
Right.
going to go look at what mankind looks like, they don't choose a delegation. Satan says, I will justify, how can I lead unless I put myself at risk? And therefore I will take on the burden of looking at all of this. Well, of course he wants it.
Yes. Yes, the character of Satan is quite
Devious
perfectly
to the
drawn.
end.
Well, at least we didn't have to wait 2 weeks for the election results, guys.
Well, there is that. Yes, he makes up in alacrity what he lacks in integrity.
Well, we can do this again if anybody wants. I didn't see any hands go up. of people wanting to read. But I can,
Seems pretty clear to me.
yeah, yeah. And then we will see what Satan finds in limbo
Yeah,
next week. And we'll try to do scenes 4 and 5, which I don't think I've sent you yet, but I will.
I want to mention, thanks for putting this on, and then I learned something that I hadn't thought about before, which is George Bernard Shaw's play Man and Superman, which is supposed to be a little bit about Don Juan and a little bit about the battle between the sexes. I wrote an essay to pass my AP English exam back when I was in high school. And there's an opening scene where they're having a parliamentary debate on top of a mountain in the Sierra Madres. And it wasn't until this evening that I realized that Shaw and his audience would have obviously had these moments in Milton on their minds when they were doing that scene. That I thought it was, oh, clearly that he was making fun of parliaments in Europe at the time when Shaw was writing, pre-World War I. But I'm realizing now that his audience, which would have been a relatively educated audience, would have had the various devils in hell arguing about this kind of stuff in mind as well.
You're probably right. That's probably, I've never actually seen Man and Superman staged. It'd be interesting to see what the traditions are about staging that. And yeah, in the 19th century, every educated English speaker knew Milton almost as well as they knew the Bible.
did they study it in school, or was it studied in church, or where did they
It was
read
not studied in church. It was studied in school, and it was controversial. The church didn't much care for it as theology when it was published, because remember, Milton was on the outs.
You said that he wasn't in a position of whatever you said earlier. Huh?
He was no longer in any kind of position of authority
Right.
at the time that
So
he
he
wrote
wrote-
Paradise Lost.
Did he write this to make money, or did he write this to annoy the authorities, or what was his motive?
I think his motive had nothing to do with the reception of the text, but just doing it.
But it was
Father
well
Mautner?
known.
That's often the case with poetry. It's not written for any kind of forensic purpose.
But
Despite the fact that each book has an argument, it's not necessary. And, there are endless PhD
Milton
papers.
was very self-aware.
But in the time that this was written, poetry was very popular, because
Mhm.
people used to read it in their homes because they didn't have TV or whatever, and it was kind of sort of the popular entertainment of the time, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah. And the poem was successful and highly regarded in Milton's time.
Right. I mean, it was sort of the in thing to do was to write something long that was read around, certain households, to
Right.
sort of pass the time and stimulate discussion, and sort of be kind of on the in, sort of with the latest sort of bestseller or the latest conversation piece at the next dance or whatever they did to entertain themselves.
Right. Well, in Milton's lifetime, the epic was turned into a piece of music by John Dryden, which was never performed.
Oh, really?
But a libretto was written, but never performed.
Would this be considered at the time kind of edgy and therefore more marketable, for lack of
Well, edgy
Yeah,
did not make
especially
things
amongst the
marketable in the 17th and 18th century.
Did
better?
people
More,
buy it?
maybe
Was
more
it sold?
popular amongst those that had access to this kind of circulation.
Right. Right.
But they sold it. It wasn't like published in a newspaper or something. It
No.
was- People bought it.
It was something, the main way of getting things published in the 17th century would have been by subscription.
Oh, that's right. They kind of told people, support me. It's sort of like a GoFundMe nowadays.
Actually, yeah.
They bought unseen, unwritten stuff, and then the guy got the money and then he wrote it. I suppose it made him eat regularly or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, yeah. It kept him going.
So he had to come up with good material.
No, there's no marketing involved.
No, I mean, okay.
Yeah, it's not a business.
Well,
But
it's
it
like some
was
of
a
the composers at the
reputation.
time had to compose their music, whether they were inspired or not, right?
Yeah, and
It's not-
musicians and composers generally had patrons.
Yeah, and they fed him.
Yeah, poets often had patrons. And like I said, Milton had his father-in-law who helped give him refuge because he had fallen out of favor. And then he kind of went into internal exile. And then there was another revolution. And by that time, Milton was in the revolution of 1689, Milton was gone by then, but his work became all the more popular and well-read because of its themes, predominantly. Not because of his religious perspective. There's all kinds of problems. Have a good night, Justin. Whoop, thanks for joining us. He's gone. Oh well. There's all kinds of theological problems with the text. And it was not popular at all with the church when it was first created. But it's one of those things that by being around and being read and being loved sort of became an important part of the English canon.
Well, now, are people my age, our age, supposed to have come across this in school?
Yes.
I mean, I would assume it would be part of a classical education, but I came from a kind of a rural background and we learned grammar and, we read a lot of literature, but I must confess that when you first started talking about this, I was thinking that Paradise Lost was something different because the only thing that I had ever been exposed to with a similar name was a movie that came out in 1937 called Lost Horizons, kind of a Shangri-La thing, And I honestly thought that, and I thought, isn't that interesting? It'd be interesting to see how that has application here, because I frankly had no idea what Paradise Lost was until like this month.
Excellent. All
So
right.
thank you.
Well,
John, my education got a nudge.
And I think in school now, you're much more likely to encounter the Inferno of the Divine Comedy of Dante than you are Paradise Lost, because it's easier to read.
Translation.
Milton's diction was weird when he published it the first time. It's very strange, but it actually does work when you read it out loud, I think. I've heard some good, especially the speeches of Satan.
Well, it's incredibly
Can I say
efficient. I mean,
Monica.
there are no wasted words.
Right.
Yeah. Actually, I studied it. I'm from Lima, Peru, from South America, and I studied this in college. I'm an English major. So 20 years ago, if you were majoring in English, you would have studied Paradise Lost, but this is a long time ago.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And because English is not my first language, I had a little trouble understanding it the first time I read it. But now it's clear as water, Michael. Thank you. Yeah,
I'm
it's
glad. One of the
much
things
better
I
when you
got-
read it a second time or a third time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things I got this week was a prose version of Paradise Lost, which is really good for capturing the plot. This is by a professor of English named Daniel Danielson. I Googled No Fear Shakespeare Milton.
Ah,
No Fear Shakespeare is translations of Shakespeare into contemporary English, which is actually very helpful.
Is it in the same series? Is it the same publisher?
No, it just came up when I Googled that. And there was a review of this in the New York Times, which was actually pretty good because it was, okay, you've done this, but why?
Father, I was wondering, back in the day, when this was popular, would you assume that there would be groups of people like this getting together to really discuss it? Would it be that kind of thing?
It was not performed. It was not the kind of poetry that got read aloud in public.
So this was avant-garde maybe at the time? This took, so in other words, was there a certain like a lead or something that could understand the wording? Because like you say, it's kind of difficult.
It's difficult, yeah.
Yeah. So was there a relatively small audience that could actually read?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the number of people who were literate in England in the 17th century was greater than in many other countries, but was still pretty small.
It's surprising though, how if you read it the first time, I you know, before this, I when I first got the paper, I read it to myself and just forced my way through it. And then I went back and read it again, and it was remarkable how much sense it made the second time around.
Right.
yes.
You know, and I tried different emphasis and different words, and then I had to look up some words to even see how to pronounce them, let alone understand, you know, what they meant. But there are a lot of things that are difficult that don't get clear on the second time or the third time.
Right.
But this seemed to, because it has essence, if that's the proper way. You know, you get what the person's getting at, even if you don't understand every
word.
Yeah.
It's interesting that Professor Richmond, in putting this together, did not modernize the spelling, which is something that a lot of people do. I mean, you'll see Shakespeare with spelling modernized for performance, especially. So
I'm rereading some of Satan's lines, and it sounds more correct to speak like Yoda. Hell have ye judged. Well ended long debate.
There's a rain in hell and serving heaven.
Exactly.
Well, I was reading that it's in blank verse, and that blank verse, see, I did all this stuff I didn't know. But blank verse is read, it's got a cadence, and that's what makes it verse, not that anything rhymes. And so you kind of look for the cadence, and I wasn't particularly successful at that, but it did occur to me that that was why some things were spelled the way they were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Milton, in rejecting rhyme, was being radical as a poet in the 17th century, and he was doing it very purposefully. He wrote some pieces against rhyme. That rhyme has trapped and imprisoned English poetry. So he has certainly liberated it from that.
Okay.
Do you think there'd ever be an attempt to modernize the writing and make it into a movie? Or?
Oh, sure. No, this prose opening, this prose translation absolutely does that. And this is a good place. This is a good way for us to end. I ended last time with the reading of the opening stanza, if that's the right word, because they're not really in stanzas, it's not organized that way. And here, let me read you that same thing in this prose translation. This is the opening of the epic. These lines are not included anywhere in Professor Richmond's text that you've been given. Tell the story, heavenly muse, of humankind's first trespass, of forbidden fruit whose lethal taste brought death and sorrow to our world and drove us out of Eden, until one greater human should redeem us and regain the happy place we lost. You on the shrouded peak of Horeb or Sinai inspired that shepherd who first taught God's chosen people how, in the beginning, the heavens and the earth rose out of chaos. Now I ask, be my inspirer too. Or if Mount Zion pleases you more, with Siloam's waters flowing near the temple of God, then from there I seek your help. For my daring story aims to surpass the ancient muses of Helicon, striving to achieve what no one in poetry or prose has ever attempted. And above all, you who would rather indwell a pure and upright heart than any other temple, you, Spirit, I seek as my teacher, for you know. In the very beginning, you were there like a dove, spreading your wings across the vast abyss, infusing it with life. So now give light to me, banish my darkness, and lift me up unto solid ground, that I may scale the heights of this mighty theme, to affirm eternal providence and justify the ways of God to man.
Nice.
Easier to follow than the word order in the original.
Mhm.
That's a pretty magnificent promise of what's to come.
Yes, justify the ways of God to man. And he is treating the Holy Spirit as dove, as his muse. So he's asking God to inspire him the same way that the pagan muses were called upon by Homer and Virgil,
Very good.
the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Aeneid. The opening line of the Iliad in the Robert Fitzgerald translation is, "Sing in me, muse, and through me tell the story of that man skilled in all ways of contending, Odysseus." So the muses are the ones who are the voice that the poet channels.
Yes.
And Milton
Invocation
wants-
of the muses. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're done with scene 3. I'm going to stop the recording now.